Where them Catholics at? Yeah. Yo, where them Catholics at? Man, what's the matter with these bishops?
Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's the Catholic Convert Show, and of course, it's a glorious day here in northwestern South Carolina, and I'm going to give Ed the benefit of the doubt today and say it's probably at least a decent day in Jersey, which is a feat in and of itself. So, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing all right. It's always, people don't realize this, but in Jersey, at least in the part of Jersey I live in, every day is 72 and sunny. That's just a thing. I mean, that's year round, buddy. Never rains.
Yeah, I know that's a lie.
We've been ramping up this week. It's been around 90 or so with high humidity, but showers coming in later tonight, and then tomorrow's going to be back in the 70s. So there we go.
Oh, yeah, I'm digging it because, we had all that entire week here with barely cracked 80. And then this week it's been staying in the 90s. Next week it's all in the 90s. But the week after that, it's forecast to have our first sub 60 degree morning.
Oh, very good.
Yeah. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I'm actually surprised that we're doing the show right now.
Why?
Because as much as I drank yesterday with Father Longenecker and Joseph Pierce, I woke up at 5 a.m. completely surprised that I didn't even have the slightest hint of a hangover. So I kind of feel invincible right now.
I'm going to say that you probably aren't, but we can test that theory. We can definitely test it.
Thou shalt not tempt the Lord.
But I got connection. I'm a Jersey guy. I got connections everywhere. I got connections in South Carolina.
Yeah,
I could have a guy knocking on your door in 15 minutes.
If he makes it past the Mastiff, he deserves a chance.
Yeah.
But no, yesterday was great, man. We finished up the show, ran some errands with my wife because my wife hates driving. So she's like, "Oh, you got the keys. Let's go." Then I headed out, Father Longenecker's house. Beautiful home, by the way. You can definitely tell his wife is English. There's the Union Jack flying off the porch.
Oh boy.
Like a very large amount of horticulture endeavors.
Yeah.
Like very English garden, not boxy like you find here. But it was, got there right a little bit before Joseph. We walked in, had some what I think may have been bacon wrapped scallops, and then some steaks, baked potatoes, marinated artichoke. It was pretty good. But of course, the Nurcha beer was flowing. Have you ever heard of Nurcha beer?
I've heard of every beer there is.
Sure. But this is actually made by the Benedictine monks in the birthplace of St. Benedict.
Yes.
So that was flowing. Then, of course, the Mad Royals were flowing, which is basically a Manhattan, but you use scotch. So,
see, that one I didn't know.
That was very good. And then, of course, the copious amounts of red wine, followed by some peach brandy. All in all, I shouldn't be walking.
I don't know about you, young man.
It was a great time.
I'm sure it was.
Good conversation, good company, good cigars, because I picked up some McAuliffe cigars on the way there. And the conversation was incredible. Believe it or not, the majority of it was spent around Shakespeare. Talking Twelfth Night, Othello, King Lear. And because I don't know if you know this, but Father Longenecker is a prolific writer himself.
Well, that I knew, yeah.
He even dabbles in plays, writing plays and theatrical productions.
Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah. So not confirmed yet, but I may be helping him produce one of his productions
That'd be cool.
at one of the local theater gigs setups here. But we'll see how that goes. There's a lot on the table right now.
Yeah.
But no, like I said, drink, meat, cigars, good company. And it was a pretty good night. And what it did is it kind of reiterated some of the points that have always stuck out to me the most. That G.K. Chesterton talked about when he was talking about the Catholic Church. He said, if I remember the quote correctly, the Catholic Church is like a thick steak. Check. We had that. A glass of wine. We had that times many. And a good cigar. And we had that. But, when most, I guess you could say, secular people think about the Catholic Church, or more often, their mischaracterization of it, I'm pretty sure almost none of them would use those sensory metaphors. It's usually with them, it's the very boorish criticisms, but to that you can always kick back, take a sip of your wine, light your cigar, and kind of sit above that criticism, right?
Yeah.
Because when you look at it through a Catholic lens, you see something on a deeper level, right? And it's where you start to see the truth and the nature of things without having to get into debates with plebeians. And I say that lovingly.
Yeah.
Right. So, but why is the question? Why would he even compare steaks, wine, cigars, and good company to the Catholic Church? Because those are things to be savored, right? Chesterton saw truth as a thick, juicy, perfectly cooked steak, because it's something you could really sink your teeth into, right? Beauty is like that perfect glass of French burgundy. It's timeless. It's robust. Goodness and purity, it's that smoky flavor of the cigar. It's mystifying, it's satisfying. So when you reach for the height of all of these savory indulgences here on this plane, on earth, and you combine them and mix them in our minds, we can elevate our understanding of faith. It's something that's worth cherishing. It's something that's worth enjoying, and something that's worth sharing. But again, it's worth savoring, right? Your faith has to be savored, but how do you do that? Right? So Saint Anselm of Canterbury, I believe, described the church as faith seeking understanding. Now, any Catholic who seeks understanding through what we all have to do, because we're never done, and we've talked about this before, diligent study, diligent prayer, you're going to get rewarded with these incredible treasures and joys, and you're never going to get tired or bored, or especially not complacent of contemplating God. Right? Now, a non-Catholic who searches very genuinely for God, he'll find his questions answered, and he'll find his heart is set on fire, and he'll be amazed because his deepest longings are satisfied. Now, I know it sounds like I'm talking very high level here, but ever since Pentecost, the original Pentecost, the church has been, and as it states, will always be, this great meeting place of God's people, right? Our knowledge of God is no longer obscured by the darkness of the pagan days. When we come into the fullness of the church, we are reconnected with God's inner life. And, yeah, we're still going to continue to immerse mankind as a whole in truth, goodness, and beauty. Now, you don't have to agonize and beg for spiritual fulfillment, and you don't have to fill your life with all these distractions as the secular world does, with a very nihilistic and hedonistic kind of mindset. When you come into the fullness of the church, all those things are met. But more than that, the treasures of heaven, we get a preview of those things here on earth. The Catholic Church is Christ's kingdom on earth. We've got a capital, we've got a military, we've got embassies, we've got territories, right? Mm-hmm. All the way from Vatican City to the smallest of dioceses and parishes. But when you're trying to savor your faith the same way that you savor that big juicy steak or that great cigar or the time you spend in good company, there has to be a trail, a path, like a main highway to do that. And that highway is built on the sacraments. You want to, I don't know, ponder the inner life of God. You want to know the secrets of creation, or I don't know, just have some inner peace and be able to rest face to face with Christ. Right? The secret's in front of us. You consume his own flesh. You drink his own blood. You surrender to his authority and his divinity. And you welcome his own soul within you, right there in the Eucharist. And, you know, the holy sacrifice of the Mass is heaven on earth. It's this direct face-to-face encounter with God. You know, the Holy Eucharist places that divine life within you, right? And so all of the sacraments, baptism, confirmation, the Holy Eucharist, penance, marriage, holy orders, and what's the last one? Extreme unction. They're all these well springs of God. And the taste of these, I guess you could say, savory realities are what Chesterton was talking about, in that the Catholic Church is like a good steak, a perfect wine, and a good cigar. And you mix all of those savory things and you savor the good company. Because look, there's absolutely nothing in heaven that you could do that is not completely good. Like fully and wholly good. Now, here on earth, we get these previews because it's important to, you know, discernment, temperance, because it's easy to go overboard on the cigars, on the steaks, on the wine, and even on the company, because, you know, we're not supposed to be getting drunk. I'm glad I stopped before I did, because I was still able to drive home. But obviously, being with an Englishman and a priest, they are much more experienced than I am in the consumption of wine and spirits, because these guys didn't look phased at all, and I had to finally cut them off. I was like, no thanks. I'm going to finish what's in my glass and I'm done. Got to go home. But I don't think enough Catholics are taking a step back. At least this is the way it can appear online. You know, taking a step back and actually savoring being Catholic. Because it's so easy to get caught up. Oh, the Pope said or didn't say this. Oh, this priest, or mostly Jesuits, said this or that, or did this thing. The NCR is doing stupid stuff again, as per usual. And so they find something to complain about. They find, oh, well, this Protestant guy over here said that, you know, derogative thing about the Blessed Virgin. I'm going to be upset about it. Okay? I understand all these things, because The faith is so near and dear to our own hearts. They're an intrinsic part of our lives. Snap earthly judgment reactions of wanting to basically go crusade on some mothers is normal. It's a normal reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But how often in your own spiritual life or in the spiritual aspect of your earthly life do you sit back and savor? You know, I use this app called the Laudate app
Mm-hmm.
that it basically helps me with my reflection of conscience before I go to confession. And as I'm going down this checklist, because there's options for anyone. There's one for anyone. There's one for single people. There's one for children. There's one for married people. So on all of those lists, except for the children's one, because it's pretty much for little kids. You know what I mean? It has this thing. Have you sat and given enough appreciation to the beauty that God has given you in your life? And if you haven't, that's something you need to confess. That is something you need to seek absolution from, because you're taking for granted and you're ignoring all of the beautiful, good, and wonderful things that we still have here on earth. Because it's easy to get into the doom and gloom and, oh, I must do, absolute penance for being such a miserable prick. Yes, you should, but that's not all. That's not all of it. It says right there in the book of Genesis, and he saw and it was good. When's the last time you sat on your porch with a cup of coffee, a cigar, by yourself, or with your spouse, with friends, sit there on the beach with a bonfire, lines cast out in the surf? You do this frequently.
Yeah.
Watch the sun come up and just be in absolute awe and wonder of the beauty, like the absolute beauty and the fullness of grace and the nature of God himself all around you, and savor that. There's a reason you don't chain smoke cigars. It takes you about an hour and a half to get through one if you're doing it right, because it's meant to be savored. And it's the same way with our faith. It's the same way with our relationship with God.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough people actually do that.
No, they don't. And you mentioned it. One of the reasons I go to the beach as often as I possibly can is, especially early in the morning, late in the evening, off season, whenever I know that there's not going to be a big crowd there, is because it gives me that opportunity, almost in complete silence, to just sit there and to look out and not only appreciate what's around me, the sand, the surf, the seagulls flying by, a couple of dolphins jumping in the waves there, things like that, but not just to appreciate that or the sunset or the sunrise I'm seeing, but in my mind will go to everything I should appreciate. The fact that I am surrounded by people who love me and care about me. The fact that I woke up that morning, that the headache I had from the day before is now gone. I'll run through a whole list of things to be thankful for on a daily basis. And people do need to stop and realize what they're given on a daily basis. My garbage trucks in my neighborhood come very early. So I'm usually out there as the sun's rising, putting garbage out to the curb. And I can't tell you how many times I'm putting that bag down on the curb and I just say, look at that sunrise. And people must think I'm who are walking their dogs or everything, I'm nuts or whatever. Why is that guy standing there with a bag of garbage in his hand, staring off into the distance? But that's
it's
what'll
Jersey.
happen.
It's normal.
It's exactly, but that's what'll happen. I will just be so taken by what's right there in front of me. Whereas most people would be head down, drop the bag on the curb, go in because I got to cook breakfast, I got to do laundry, I got to do whatever, I got to get ready for work. But these things are in front of us all the time. And, it's funny because you started by talking about how we need to be thankful. Well, I threw that part in there, but about being, because I'm very thankful that I can't, even when I was a kid, I kind of figured out that being born into a Catholic household was something special and something to be savored and something to be thankful for. And so I've always kept that in my thoughts. But also you bring up Saint Anselm, and it's funny because I love a quote from Saint Anselm, who said, "For I do not seek to understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand. For I believe this, unless I believe, I will not understand." And we just talked about that yesterday. We said, you and I, when we came to the faith, or I've been officially a member of the faith since birth, but that doesn't mean you stop investigating, you stop looking into it, you stop studying it. And I certainly haven't. But it's true. I became really entrenched in my belief in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I became so entrenched in that belief that because of that belief, I'm now able to comprehend and to understand the teachings of the church. And I think it's the same for you. You were saying that, you had that moment where you're like, yeah, this is the faith. This is the true faith. And then now you're kind of, it's almost like backtracking now and looking through and studying and investigating and realizing, yeah, I'm not surprised this is true. This all makes sense to me now. But your faith feeds your understanding as opposed to the other way around. Most people think you have to study in order to develop that faith. No, you have that faith, which allows you to now understand and to comprehend the teachings of the church and the teachings of Christ. You've got to establish that faith first. And so it's interesting, this all comes around as so many of the things that we do and we talk about do. We're talking yesterday about how we came to be faithful Catholics, and you're talking this morning about savoring and our faith, and bringing up Saint Anselm, and Saint Anselm was saying the same thing. I believed, therefore I understand. Which seems like a little backwards to some people, but to me makes perfect sense.
Well, it's only backwards to these modern secularists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because modernity and Gnosticism and, well, I guess you could call Gnostic humanism, right? They're all enemies of the church. Because think of it this way. Chesterton was telling us something else about the church too, and her relationship with modernism. So the church, like steaks, alcohol, and cigars, is considered unhealthy by modern society.
Sure.
And unfortunately, the modern secularist rants and rails against the church. He calls the church oppressive and judgmental and patriarchal. It is all those things, but it's a good thing. But in Chesterton's day, this happens because the modern secular culture has created this very skewed and moral code for itself. So modern society has this secularist moral code with certain behaviors it deems acceptable and other behaviors it says are unworthy. So without listening to God's guidance, everything under this, I guess you could call it an ideology, is out of balance. Now, the secular code, enjoying cigars is off limits, but killing babies in an abortion facility is a right worth fighting for.
Yeah.
The secular code seeks to regulate our speech and our behavior at a fundamental level, but not in conformity with the will of God. Rather, it's in the obedience to the whims of man. So society, tobacco is taboo, but it considers the church taboo as well. The church is considered unhealthy for allegedly being too judgmental and too strict. Now you've got this vegan secularist over here who he'll fast from certain food chains for reasons that he believes is, or just foods, for reasons that he believes will benefit his physical health. And it'll turn around and then rebuke the church because they tell people to fast on Fridays. But that's done for the good of mankind's spiritual health. Now, the modern health nut, who he just sits there and struggles to resist that piece of chocolate cake, will criticize Catholics who have successfully mastered their desires to resist much more dangerous temptations. And you've got the politician who wants to destroy anyone with opposing opinions. They'll slander the church for being intolerant. The abortion doctor will say the church has this backwards thinking while butchering an innocent child in what they still like to call a clinic, but it's a sacrificial temple. Right? So modern society is kind of like this prodigal son. It hasn't come to its senses yet, and it hasn't come home. And even though there's the doom course of the modern day pagans and the agnostics and the humanists, the church is always going to be here, and she's going to wait patiently with wide open arms for any soul that comes seeking. And she's going to be completely unafraid to expose the hypocrisy and set things right. She'll sacrifice, she'll endure, and she'll march just as she has throughout the entirety of human history. Why? Because she's already won. 2,000 years ago, the church was right when she said, Christ has been resurrected. 2,000 years later, the church is still right, helping mankind to be better mankind and bring all of them to God.
Mm-hmm.
If the faith is something to be savored, then the secular culture is kind of like a big crap sandwich. You have to take big bites and get it over with quickly. It only offers bitter fruits, right? But the real delicacies are right in front of us. It's these sweet experiences of God's inner life that are fully ready for any Catholic or any non-Catholic who genuinely seeks them. Right? So when you say that, some of these things sound kind of backwards, some people will agree with you. It sounds very medieval. What do you mean you believe to understand? You should understand it before you believe it. That's modern culture talking.
Sure.
So when you say some people might see it that way, it's because they are engulfed in modern culture. You see it the way it is and should be.
Modern culture is the modern doubting Thomas, right? That's what he said. He said, "I'll believe it when I can put my fingers
I
into
hate
the."
that seeing is believing. No, it
right?
isn't.
It's not. Because, but that's what people will say to us today. I'll believe that when I see it. I'll believe it when you show it to me. Kind of like when people will say, we get into it on X or whatever, and they'll say, I'll believe there's a God when he comes knocking on my door, or, the whole, the classic one. Hey, if there's a God, striking me with lightning right now. Oh, I wasn't struck with lightning, so there must not be a God.
The thing about that, though, is that
yes.
You're gonna believe when he comes knocking. Look, when he actually comes knocking, it's too late for you to believe.
Exactly.
It's too late.
When your last words are, I believe, he's going to say, too late, boss.
When he shows up in the second coming and you go, all right, I was wrong, I believe. Nah, sorry, bro, it's too late. You had all of this time.
Yeah. But such a it it's such an unbelieving world, but yet we will believe utter nonsense. You know what I mean?
It's ironic, isn't it?
It's very ironic.
Kamala Harris can get up there and say, we're reducing inflation and creating jobs. Well, the reality is you aren't.
Yeah.
Well, we've created new jobs. You didn't create new jobs. All those businesses that were closed down in the prior to the beginning of Biden's
Are now
term,
open.
they just opened. You didn't create new jobs. You just let people come back to work eventually.
Yeah.
People go, oh, they're doing great for the economy. I'm sorry. 6 years ago, I was paying like $2.35 a gallon for gas here. And now I'm paying like $3.48.
Yeah.
Like, why were eggs $7 a carton? Like, oh, we're doing so great. It's like that cartoon comic of the dog sitting at the table with the house is on fire, but he's got his coffee. He's like, oh, everything's fine,
Yeah.
And I hate the word, but it is what it is. It's gaslighting.
Yeah.
But people will believe that kind of nonsense simply because of authority bias. It's like any jerk off can put on a lab coat and be like, as a doctor, you should brush your teeth with your own urine. And people go, well, he's a doctor. He said it. Like, no. People are so quick to believe nonsense.
They are.
When you tell them truth, they go, I need to see the source, bro.
Yeah.
It's authority bias. And it's a what's the word? It's a cognitive bias that they can't break out of.
Yeah. Listen, it's just kind of like the way politicians will play with words and create new definitions for words. It's all, we're told, well, I want to create laws and things like that are gonna increase your freedom. I want you to be free. This is the land of the free. You need to have these freedoms. And
yet
but
the U.S.
But freedom doesn't mean
like the FDA wants me to register my garden and my chickens. No,
exactly. But I mean, but freedom does not mean being able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. It's kind of like, and the traditional example is abortion. I should be free to do what I want in this case. Well, no, you shouldn't be free to end the life of another human being. That's not your call to make. That's not what freedom about. Freedom is the ability to do what's right without being restricted, not the ability to do whatever without being restricted. That's something completely different, and we've lost sight of that. And
people don't like when you use their own logic and their parallels against them.
Yeah.
I saw a story, it's probably months or even a year old, maybe more, of this woman who burnt down an abortion clinic. It was either in Wyoming or Wisconsin. It was one or the other. It was a W state.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a W for the woman, by the way. But she burned it down a few weeks before it was due to open. So it was still in finishing up building it and all this other. And what did she get charged with? Well, she got charged. She got charged with arson.
Yeah.
For burning down a building. But you don't get charged with murder for aborting a baby. Why? Because the terminology is it's a clump of cells. Well, I'm sorry, that was just a pile of building materials.
Yeah.
It wasn't a building yet. It wasn't due to open. So it wasn't a building she burnt down. It was a clump of building materials. So free that woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny when they do this, it's got to be changed to their convenience, but it can't apply across the board because then it's not convenient.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like I was watching a news broadcast this morning about a church that had been vandalized, and somebody had spray painted in several locations on the outside of the church, "Kill all white people." And somebody was asking, "Well, what is the person being charged with?" Well, they're being charged with vandalism, so they've been processed. They're already out on the street, and the reporter said, "Well, wouldn't this be considered a hate crime, either against Christians or against white people?" He said, no, it's just simple vandalism. So, it depends on where you're at. I mean, there are those you're still allowed to hate and to victimize, and as Christians we fall into one of those categories that it's still okay. It's still okay to terrorize us and to abuse us and things and attack us. It's not a crime, per se.
Well, of course.
So so it just this is this world. This is the secular world that we live in, where the rules are different for believers and non-believers. I would say. How many times we've talked about folks who've been arrested for praying silently in front of an abortion clinic. Well, what were you thinking? I was praying in my head. Oh, were you praying for the lost souls of the babies that are aborted here? Yes, I was. Well, then, ma'am, you are under arrest. Getting arrested for our thoughts now. Of course, that one was in the UK.
Just once, I wish that would happen to me, because I would catch so many more charges. I'm like, if you're going to look, I might as well go all in. If you're going to arrest me for praying silently in my head, you might as well arrest me for making you wear your shoes on the inside.
Well, but here's the troubling issue of this. It's not, these decisions are not being made on whether or not the person has actually done something that reaches the level of being illegal or immoral or anything like that. It's based on which side of the secular / God-fearing, God-believing line you are standing on. And that's what the determining factor is as to whether or not you will be charged with a crime. If you're on the I believe in God side, you're more likely to be charged with something than if you are on the non-believing side. And I think that's a problem with today's world. And especially as you see the numbers drastically increasing or decreasing, depending on how you want to look at it. But the number of people who believe in a God at all, regardless of, forget about being a member of an actual faith, but just the fact that the numbers are slipping year by year by year of people who actually even believe there is any sort of a God whatsoever. And so, eventually guys like you and me, we're going to be in a minority, and then life's going to start all over again, because then we will be in a minority. We will be getting abused. We will be on the other end of hate crimes and on unlawful imprisonment and all sorts of nonsense. And
here's the question.
Yeah.
I know the conditions of martyrdom for the most part, but do you still get martyr status if you die fighting back, or is that only if you just sit there and accept it?
No, you can die fighting back. Like if you were, let's say you were a crusader or something.
I was going to say, using the Crusaders for example, if they were, if they were set upon or they were ambushed, or when Jerusalem was first attacked, and they died in defense of the faith because they were being killed because of their faith, but they died fighting back, does that still give you martyr status? So would that mean that all of those that died are still technically martyrs? I mean, I won't say all, because some of them were probably just doing it for whatever other reasons.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, some guys could have been there for monetary gain, or just because
they could have been there for shiggles.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But for the ones that were there truly defending the faith against attackers who were attacking them because of their faith.
Sure.
would that make them martyrs, or is martyrdom one of those where you have to, like, St. Lawrence, turn me over, I'm done on this side?
No,
I'm not sure, because obviously just killing a Christian doesn't make them a martyr, right?
Yeah.
It has to be because they were Christian, a hatred of the faith.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just be like, oh, well, the Christian died, because there would be a whole lot of martyrs out there, right? But no, I was wondering if it was like you have to passively accept it, or like, okay, I'm going to, you've got these situations in the communist countries like the Soviet Union back in the day when they went through and they were just murdering Christians relentlessly, and they were executing them. They were arresting them. They were locking them in gulags, and then they would, execute them. Well, obviously, if they were telling, recant your faith or you die, and they say no, and then they get shot, that makes them a martyr. Now, if the situation was recant your faith or you get shot, and I don't know, guy stands up and starts trying to beat the crap out of the guy who's getting ready to execute him, but then he dies anyway.
Yeah.
Would he still get martyr status for that?
If you die in defense of the faith, I would give you this example. Let's say you're someplace where they've decided that Catholicism is now illegal, and these government forces are surrounding the church that you're in because they're saying, we're going to come in there, we're going to destroy the tabernacle, we're going to destroy the consecrated hosts. And so as they're battling to try to break down the doors and get in, you're battling from the inside. They're firing at you, you're firing at them, and you catch a bullet and die because you were there defending the Eucharist. I'm assuming that you'd be.
See, it's an assumption, right? You're assuming it because this is something that's very inside Catholic baseball. I'm sure there is a very small. Listen, I'm sure there's a very small blurb somewhere.
No. Well, because
some document of the church that covers that. I don't know where to look for it, but I'm sure it'll explain it better.
Well, but I don't. But see, but there won't. But there would not be a definitive answer because you don't know. You cannot say for sure what the person who died, what their thought process.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in definition of a martyr.
Yeah.
And what actions constitute someone being a martyr. I'm sure that is clearly laid out in some blurb somewhere in some document within the millions of documents within the church that explains it. I just haven't found it to get the church's answer and take on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean,
it's semantic. It's semantics, but it's just one of those things. Like I don't know the church's actual position on that. We can say what we think it probably is, and we might be right, but we also might be wrong or missing a stipulation here or there. So,
yeah, I mean, everything I'm seeing basically says a person who was killed for their testimony for Jesus or faith in Jesus. So either because
maybe that's all encompassing. Meaning, even if you were fighting back, it's still the same. Well, that would make sense, right? But again, I've never actually looked all the way into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but again, I mean, there may be people that we have considered martyrs who actually aren't, and vice versa. Because again, there is that other component of what we think. It's kind of like, the church doesn't say, the church makes the assumption that Judas is rotting in hell. But does the church say with 100% certainty that he is? They do not, because only Judas and God know that answer.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So, and that would be the case. I mean, I would, if I could put it all, if I could go to Atlantic City and put it all on Judas is in hell, I would do so. And I'd feel pretty comfortable with that I'm going to win. But, but that you can't say definitively because you're not in God's head and you're not in Judas's head. You don't know if, as he was jumping off that branch or leaping off that branch or whatever, that he said, "Oh crap, did I make a big mistake?" Who knows? But so I think it's the same thing with martyrdom. I mean, but I think if those conditions are present, where you are that you are either proclaiming
It is
your faith in
ultimately
Christ.
out of hatred for the faith.
Yeah, exactly. If you die because somebody hates you because you're Catholic or Christian, I guess in general, then yeah, you are a martyr, at least as far as the church is concerned.
That makes
Which,
sense. So,
yeah.
so here comes the opportunity for it to get really weird.
Oh boy.
Has anything we talked about today tie into what you brought today?
Actually,
It usually does.
It kind of does. It kind of does, because
Well, you say kinda. I'm wondering if you're going to try to make like a really long reach.
no, not at all, not at all. I mean, I don't think it's a reach at all. Honestly, I would say, because I do have there's been several times where I've brought books with me, and and I love my Catholic books because
You got a book
especially
written
ones.
by a martyr, don't you?
What's that? It was written by a martyr. Well, but actually, the book I have was written by martyrs, because this is the New Testament Roman Catholic version from the United States Army. New Testament Roman Catholic version.
Well, yes, technically written by martyrs.
So written by martyrs, and actually, owned by people who gave their life for their country, but could just as well have given it for their God. Because I mean, why are people willing to die for the United States of America? Because of the ideals that it espouses, and one of those ideals is a belief in our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I would think, and honestly, if you think about it, I mean, this is the World War II edition. So I think that these guys whoever owned this would have believed that he was fighting against pure evil. And evil is, of course, a gift from Satan, not from God. So, but I love having these, and I've told you a million times why, all these old books, Catholic books, because I think of the people who own them. I think of how much they meant to them. I think I picture them leafing through this, especially if it's something like this, like, was this guy liberating France or whatever, and had this in his back pocket. And when he'd sit down after the end of the day, was he flipping through it and just getting his inspiration to make it through the night? But I not only collect these things, a lot of them I actually use. And this is one of those that I actually use, because it is simply the New Testament. But what they do is they break it up by day. But what I mean by that is you read a few, you read a chapter, or you read several paragraphs per day. So, like, for instance, today is August 28th. So for August 28th, we have our reading for today, which is all about baptism, in fact, and
Nice.
and how we are reborn through baptism. So I love it. So what I do is I keep this with all my other prayers that I do on a daily basis, and I will open it up to whatever today's reading is, and I will read that. And I think, well, at some point, 80 some odd years ago, the original owner may have been doing the same. He may have kept it in his back pocket, and started each morning by looking at that day's readings, and maybe it was a way of him marking time till he was going to be able to go home, or who knows. But I love these things. I have so many different books from this era that have to do with our faith, and I've mentioned it before. I cherish each and every one of them, because this is something that definitely got somebody through some ridiculously difficult moments, ones that I can't even imagine. And that's what we brought in today. We brought the New Testament for the Roman Catholic version, presented by the United States Army. And there's even a note in there from Franklin Roosevelt, which he wrote on March 6, 1941. And it's great. It's good stuff. But yeah, there you go. Does that qualify as being owned by a martyr or written by a martyr? I guess. I don't know. In a sense, it does.
I guess technically.
I mean, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let me see. Well, John obviously died on the island of Patmos from old age. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke, yeah, they all had very untimely deaths. And Paul's in there. We know how he was beheaded. So
Right.
he was martyred. So it does tie in one way, shape, or form.
Makes sense.
But there you go. I've got something actually. What is today? Wednesday. Something I will bring in on Friday or Monday that is going to be pretty cool. Well, they're all pretty cool. I have to talk to my archivist because after my last move, things got shuffled around a bit, and he's been having to dig really through a lot of stuff to pull out items for the show. So he's got to get on the shtick and really start reorganizing so we know exactly where everything is, because we don't want to start with, listen, we're 80 shows in. We don't want to start doing repeats already. There's plenty more. There's plenty more down there, and there are some things that I think about it every now and then. I'm thinking, boy, there are some items that I know I have that are super cool. I only wish I knew where they were. So I have to. What I want to do is, and the church that I hang out at all the time, they're so wishy-washy. They would never go for it. But I want to find a church around here that would allow me to take a hunk of their basement or one of the rooms they have on campus and actually have a Catholic museum. I have so much stuff. I could put up a multi-room display that would knock people's socks off. I wanted something that would be open after masses on Sundays and Saturday nights and things like that. And I think it would be great because, again, like what do I say all the time? We have such a rich and storied tradition and history in the Catholic Church. I love having these items that you can actually hold, you can touch. These are part of our, there's especially things when documents I have from popes from the 1600s and things like that. It's so cool to be able to hold that and think about the world, the way the world was at that time when that was written and things like that. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah, it really is. It really is cool. I dig it. Other people might not dig it, but
yeah,
who cares? It adds another element to the tangibility of the history and the reality of the church. And it's something that you can savor. You get to enjoy it. It's just one more piece of the truth and goodness and savory aspect of the faith.
There you go. I mean, there's so much of our faith to love, and so much of it, so much of the history of our faith that we can learn from, and I think that it's important for us to hold on to these items and to preserve them and to make people aware of them. They all the things that I have, I bring them on the show here, but I also take them into my CCD class when it's something that relates to what we're talking about. I take it into my Bible studies when it relates to what we're talking about. And you'll be amazed that, especially with the Bible studies, where I'll have something on display and we have our Bible study, and afterwards I'm there for 2 hours after the meeting, talking to people about what it is that I've brought in, because they're just so fascinated by it, and they think it's so cool that I own these things, and they feel the same thing. They realize that there's that connection to our history as Catholics, and so it's kind of cool. It really brings the faith to life, as they would say.
Makes sense. I do apologize to your students for pretty much anything that I've caused you to talk about them with.
They love it. We'll be starting a new semester very soon, and actually we're starting a new Bible study in I guess about 3 or 4 weeks, and we're doing the Church Fathers, and that's going to be a blast, because
nice.
It was kind of by request, because I tell these folks all the time when they're saying, well, why does the church teach this? Why does the church teach that? And I said, well, let's go back to the Church Fathers and see what they say about this. And they're like, well, who are these guys? Who are the Church Fathers? Why should I know about them? And I say, listen, these are the guys that were in the trench. These are the guys that were taught by the apostles. So when they speak, I listen, because you can't get much closer to the source than the church fathers. Obviously, church fathers, it extends a few centuries past Christ, but still, these are, guys that are many more generations closer to Christ than I ever will be. So and I think that's why a lot of non-Catholic Christians, they will avoid the writings of the church fathers, because the church fathers, you cannot deny, were extremely Catholic. In fact, the first time the term Catholic was used was in in 102 AD by Ignatius of
Actually,
Antioch.
it was in the book of Acts.
Well, when what is that? Catholicos. Yeah. See, yeah.
But yes, it was Ignatius of Antioch who
said
his epistle to the Smyrnians, who said, "Where there is Jesus Christ, there is the Catholic
there
Church."
is the Catholic Church. Yeah, where you find the bishops and the presbyters and Jesus, you will find the Catholic Church.
Yeah, the whole thing is like, I don't know, that long.
Yeah.
He wasn't quite as thorough as St. Paul in his epistles.
No. But he got
when Paul went to go send, I can just imagine how much stretching had to be done and preparation for Paul when he went to go and send a letter. He's like, all right, I'm just going to mail these guys the U.S. tax code real quick. Imagine being the guy that had to carry that. He's like, I'm going to need 3 donkeys because it was not enough parchment to get this letter out here.
It was Luke who was transcribing everything he said, right?
Right, but listen, he's the reason why there are so few trees in that region.
Is that why? Oh boy.
Oh, he was tearing it up, making sure that he could get every last word.
This is what I love.
How many words did St. Paul write? All of them.
All of them. This is what I love about St. Paul, is that, and I've had people say to me, what is up with this guy? Because every letter starts with this long, verbose, drawn out, descriptive sentence. And I say, well, yeah, but when you read that, don't you see how on fire for the faith this guy was? That's what I take out of it. He's very descriptive. He'll put 30 words into a sentence that needs 2 words. And I say, but that's,
I just feel like he would be very upset in modern times.
Yeah.
Imagine you get this mass text, when your girlfriend or your wife is mad at you and she sends you like a 47-page book in a text message.
Yeah.
A lot of people today, including me, would just reply with, okay.
Paul would not be pleased.
Paul would not be pleased.
He'd send someone over to chat with you.
Yeah, probably.
But that's what I love about the guy. It's like, you cannot read anything from Paul and not yourself feel fired up. I think. I mean, that's just my opinion. It just, you can tell when somebody, like, people say that about me when I give talks and things like that. Like, man, you really love God a lot, don't you? And yeah, of course I do. I didn't know there was an option not to, but it's true. Yeah, you gotta love it. You gotta love Paul. The guy rocks.
Yeah. I tell you what, if you want to spend a whole lot of time reading his letters, you can savor them. But
you could savor Paul's letters.
Just mind you, savoring his letters is gonna probably last you a couple of years to get to the end.
It's gonna, yeah.
He has never been accused of excess brevity.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not Paul.
All right. Well, here we are at the end of it. 40 seconds. So thanks for watching, listening, subscribing, liking, and sharing. And of course, pushing all of this positive Catholic message into the faces and down the throats of all those anti-Catholics out there.
Excellent.